Hi everyone, hope you are all doing well and welcome back to some more New World. So the game has been out for, well, about a month now, and so I wanted to take the time to cover my thoughts, progress, likes and dislikes, and kind of what's changed over the past month as well. Quite a lot has changed since launch. Probably the biggest issue we had at the start was we had some really pretty significant server queue times. Up in there, sort of tens of thousands on some servers. But since then, things have changed. Obviously, player numbers have started to drop somewhat, server capacity has been increased, new servers have been opened up, and also very recently we've had character transfers become available, all of which has sort of helped to pretty much eliminate server queues in all but the sort of very busiest of servers. And so that kind of leads us on to player numbers. Quite a few people stated, like back at the beginning or a little bit before the game release, that the game will be completely dead in 2 weeks to a month. So how true is this, and has this really come to pass? Well, to look at statistics, at launch, player numbers peaked at around about 900,000, 910, something like that, but averaged around 700 to 800,000 in the first week. Currently, today we are peaking at around 500,000 and maybe averaging around the 400,000 mark. It is certainly a pretty decent drop, but equally 500,000 players is still an awful lot of players given the game has actually now been out for a month. There was always going to be some drop off. It's going to be interesting to see how this develops over the next few months and if player numbers now start to steady out, or if they continue to drop off over time. And I think that will give a better idea of the game's sort of long-term viability. But at least where we are now, the game is far from dead. 500,000 players is still a lot of people in-game. So what about content? Does the game provide long-term playability and sort of good content throughout the levelling process? Is it a fun experience? Well, sort of. There is a lot to enjoy whilst levelling through New World. Beautiful scenery, enjoyable combat, in my opinion. We'll move on to combat a bit later on. It's got an awesome crafting system, expeditions and more, loads of things to do, all of which is really great. However, there are a few drawbacks in my opinion. Questing through both the main quest line and side quests are going to be making up a fairly significant portion of the levelling process. And it does sometimes feel quite repetitive and a little bit of a chore. Often the quests revolve around kill X mobs to sort of collect X items, a lot of fetch and carry, do this, do that, very similar style quests, right from the beginning in level 1 all the way up to level 60. And this kind of, combined with the sort of relative lack of an immersive main storyline quest, I mean, there is a story, and there's voice acting and everything to go with it, but it really just didn't grab me very much, and I think that's been the experience of other players as well, which kind of leads to this slightly dull questing experience. It doesn't make the levelling process bad, it's still a lot of fun, and it certainly doesn't ruin the game, but if you're expecting, a Witcher 3 style levelling process, then you're going to be a little bit disappointed. And this then does lead us on to combat. Up front, I personally really like the combat system in New World, but it does seem that it comes under quite a lot of criticism for a few features. One of which is not having like 20 abilities per weapon. Instead in New World you only have 3. There's a range to pick from, but you can only have a maximum of 3. But for me, in my opinion, this is better. It's not about button mashing and chaining huge combos, having 15 slight variations of the same ability, but it's much more about timing. It's about getting your dodge correct to miss the incoming strike, knowing when to use light and heavy attacks, blocking, all of which has a much bigger impact on the fight rather than your abilities. I'm not sure I'd go as far as to say the combat is super fast paced, but it does have a different speed to it. Certainly hard enough for me to struggle to get my timings and movement right sometimes. So what about after the grind? How does the end game content stack up? Well, not too badly in my opinion. from sort of the legendary weapon quest lines, expedition runs that you can do, the 50v50 territory wars and outpost rush, if that ever actually opens up again. There is quite a lot of stuff that you can do and explore. This is honestly really important for the long-term viability of the game, and it's really essential that people are able to continue to have stuff to do and explore in the endgame. I mean, currently there are easily hundreds of hours of content in the game that people can get stuck into. But this does kind of lead us on to what is next. Is there any new content planned, or what does the future of the game look like? We obviously know that we already have some stuff on the way. We saw interviews with Scott Lane before the game was released talking about stuff like Void Gauntlets, new regions, etc. But unfortunately, we do not have any sort of timetable or ETA for any of this. I think for sort of the launch, Amazon have been focusing the bulk of their efforts on sorting server problems, any sort of in-game bugs, preparing for the character server transfers, all that sort of stuff. However, now that a lot of that stuff is sort of completed and out of the way, I'd like to see more efforts being put into a new content schedule. Ideally, maybe even producing a roadmap. If the game wants to maintain good player numbers in the long term, then new updates and new content are going to be absolutely essential. So, is the game worth the $40 price tag? In my humble opinion, yes, absolutely. I've already had hundreds of hours in the game, and I'm going to be getting hundreds of more hours out of the game, which for me at least makes it very good value. I mean, is everyone who plays New World going to enjoy it? No, of course not. But if you accept perhaps the game isn't crazy revolutionary, but it is a very solid game, it feels fairly well polished as MMOs go in my opinion, and it's only at the very beginning of its life cycle, then I think you're going to get quite a lot of enjoyment out of it. I would like to see more content delivered and quicker patch rollouts going forwards, but overall, my first month in New World has really been very largely positive. But just before we completely wrap up, I did want to briefly touch again on the cash shop. As I mentioned in my sort of initial release review video about a month ago, that at release it was just cosmetic, things like skins, emotes, crests, etc. Well, I just wanted to check that is this still the case today, or has anything changed? Well, in short, it's the same. Still only cosmetic stuff in the shop. Some new stuff like Robin Hood skin is being released through Prime, but again, it's all just cosmetic, which is good. Long may it stay that way. But what are your thoughts on this? Have you been playing for the past month, or are you just getting started in New World? And if so, how have you found the game so far? Do you think I've got it right on this review, or am I a little bit off the mark? Either way, do be sure to let me know in the comments down below. Of course, subscribe to the channel for lots more New World content, and I shall see you guys all on the next one.